Thank you very much, Bernard, and thank you everybody for coming, and thank you once again to Michael and the Department of Maltese for this very, very kind invitation to come and speak to you all. Okay, so I think most but not all of you were at one or both of the talks yesterday. So those of you who were know by now that I like to try and make things a bit interactive. I don't want to just stand here talking myself the entire time, especially at the beginning. So we'll start off with a pop quiz. Okay, what, in your opinion, is the difference between a language and a dialect? Who would? Yes, please.
A language is used in Parliament.
Right.
It is used in the law courts.
Mm-hmm. I agree with both. I certainly accept that position. And a dialect?
And a dialect is not usually used in court,
Mm-hmm.
although it may be used because of the people using the court. For
Right.
example, you get a farmer who doesn't know who speaks a dialect.
Right, right. Okay.
As you go, for example, in Italy, instead of hearing sacramento, sacramento.
Right.
And,
Okay. Thank you very much. That's a very useful perspective. Does anyone else have a different perspective? Yes.
I don't know about this. A language might be one of the dialects that has been given institutional recognition.
of course,
Wonderful.
then a dialect may be raised to a language.
Yes. Thank you. This is excellent. This is basically, these are the two main perspectives that one can have on this question. And I think they're both valid. But they are somewhat contradictory, perhaps. Anyway, in a sense, yes.
But a dialect is raised to a language through grammar.
Okay.
And that exists.
Okay. Okay. So in a sense, I think it's a trick question. And the reason for that is both of these words predate the scientific study of language. And unfortunately, this is what you find with many key terms about language. They're extremely old terms, and they came about and became imbued with meaning long before people started thinking systematically about what languages are. Word, the word word certainly falls into that category.
What goes to that category?
The word, word, word.
Mondo?
No, word.
Mondo, W-O-R-D.
That one, yes, yes. You know, the word word exists, and so we assume it must have a precise, a unitary precise definition, but if you look into it, you can find definitions of word for individual languages, but if you try and make it cross-linguistically valid, you often run into difficulties. Okay, so obviously dialect and language are not meaningless, but unless we're going to make our own precise definition on the fly right now, generally speaking, as they're generally used, there's no precise distinction between the two. And for this reason, many linguists, all linguists will use the terms language and dialect now and then because often they're convenient. But if you want to sort of get away from having to use one of those two terms, you can just use the neutral term variety. So I'll do that a bit today. Okay. To understand a bit better these terms, language and dialect, we could look at the etymologies. But, you know, we must be cautious here because I think it's absolutely crucial to understand that the meaning of a word today is not determined by its etymology. And I'll just give you one example of many possible, which is the English word nice. Okay? The English word nice ultimately derives from Latin nescius, ignorant. That in no way means that, unbeknownst to us, there is a hint of the meaning ignorant hidden in the English word nice today. No, we know what nice means. It means nice.
But we don't use it. We try not to use it. Because when you say he's a nice boy,
yeah.
what are you saying about the boy?
Well, it's like many words, it's not very precise. Okay, but anyway, let's take a look at the etymologies. If we look at the etymologies, we find this. So language comes into English from Anglo-Norman or Old French, langage, and it's a system of spoken or written communication used by a country, people, community, etc. Okay, that's not too surprising. And then what about dialect? So from ancient Greek, dialektos, discourse, conversation, discussion, debate, argument, speech, language, way of speaking, accent. In Hellenistic Greek, also language of a country or district. So you see, from the beginnings of these terms, there was no very precise distinction. Okay, so what about how dialect is used today? I would say that there are two main ways in which it's used. And we heard both of them basically suggested at the beginning. So first of all, you can use it in a genealogical sense. You can say that two varieties, right? We're not going to say that they're languages or dialects. We're just saying they're varieties. If they're related, then we can say that they're not only related but also dialects of the same language, if they're mutually comprehensible to monolingual native speakers of both. Okay? And from that point of view, Standard English is a dialect of English. There are many dialects of English, and Standard English is one of them. Okay? Then there's a completely different way that dialect is used, which is socio-politically. So this is in opposition to, yes, in ordinary speech, it would be in opposition to a language. I would prefer to say in opposition to a standard language. Okay? So any linguistic variety spoken within a region that differs from the standard language or languages of that region. And there are several very interesting examples one can point to here. Like, for example, people often, and linguists as well, even linguists who understand the true situation often use the term Italian dialects. It's sort of harmless up to a point. But you know what the Italian dialects are, right? They're Romance languages that are in no way descended from Tuscan Italian, right? They're the Romance languages of Italy. But because they're not the standard languages of Italy, from a sort of socio-political point of view, they're looked down on. Of course, there are also dialects of Tuscan Italian, but there we are certainly talking about varieties of Tuscan Italian that are easily mutually comprehensible. But many of the Romance languages of Italy are completely incomprehensible to monolingual speakers of other ones. Then, for example, we can take the term patois in France, which is or was used very similarly to dialect, and that's used to include any language, any variety at all, or historically it was used to refer to any variety spoken in France that wasn't standard French, including the only very distantly related Breton and the completely unrelated Basque, right? So that's a kind of purely socio-political use of dialect. These are these are dialects because they're not the standard language, and they're, in some sense, therefore considered to be inferior. But as I was arguing yesterday, I don't think that point of view makes much sense. Okay. All right. So, let's get more controversial. Is Maltese a dialect of Arabic? What do you think?
It was, but then it became a language in its own right.
Okay. How did that happen? By what processes?
Alienation from the main Arabic countries, in contact with other people not coming from Arabic countries.
Yes. I completely agree. Those are the relevant processes. I guess let me ask a slightly different question, which is what pieces of evidence can we point to now to support the claim that Maltese is not a dialect of Arabic?
It's no longer, it's a language in its own right.
Yeah, how do you, I agree with you, of course, but what, what tells us that? How do we know that?
The semantic side of the language, how it was, seed, how it was seeded.
No. Well, let's have another suggestion, yes.
I guess it constitutes the whole world of a people in the Wittgensteinian sense. It serves each and every need from an institutional to a common person's in the street need of that people.
Right. Yes, that I agree with that. So, in a sense, it's another trick question. Because as we've already said, dialect has no single precise meaning. The answer is yes, Albert, yeah.
It's really a tricky question.
Yeah.
I suppose most people wouldn't know here. There's an article by Ellen Kay, which is called Arabic Dialects and Maltese. Yeah. But to come back to your question, if you try to apply the criterion of mutual intelligibility,
yes,
there's a curious situation, because all the Maltese I know, when asked whether they understand Libyan, say, or Tunisian, would say definitely no.
Yeah.
But when you ask, some North Africans whether they understand Maltese, curiously they reply yes.
Yes, that's
And,
absolutely right.
I have a theory about that. It's not the time to go into it now.
Yeah.
But the intelligibility criterion, is a bit hazy.
Yes, it's tricky with Maltese. Yeah. That's absolutely right.
And Maltese has the romantic side.
Yes, of course.
Coming from Italian.
Of course.
But Italian itself is coming from Arabic. Because Italian comes from Latin from Greek, Greek from Arabic. I trace those languages.
You trace them, okay.
Even Chinese is coming from Arabic.
No, now that I cannot agree with you on, but we don't have time to discuss it now. Yes, Albert. So this issue, of course, very recently has actually been investigated empirically, and it is, if I remember rightly, it is true to say that North Africans are somewhat better at understanding Maltese than Maltese are at understanding these North African dialects, somewhat. But I think there's also, as a sort of learner of Arabic myself, I can't prove this, but I believe it to be the case that there's a sort of ideological incentive on the part of, felt by many Arabs to minimize the extent to which they struggle to understand other Arabic varieties. But yes, okay, so on the socio-political level, obviously, as Bernard was pointing out, Maltese is not a dialect of Arabic. It's the standard language of a nation, and it's in the life of the Maltese people. there's no sort of relationship between Maltese and Arabic. Arabic plays no real role. Okay, but what about genealogically? Is another trick question, because really, and this is developing the point I made just a second ago, all the varieties that we call Arabic together make up really a language family, not a language. If we are taking the criterion of mutual comprehensibility to be the key criterion. And, you know, maybe we shouldn't. Maybe other criteria are more important. Of course, there are all kinds of political, cultural, and historical...
Granted, the mamma of nouns, there is the mamma of nouns,
yes.
and the mamma of verbs, etc.
Yeah,
the mamma of nouns.
Yes, of course, of course. Okay. Yeah. Of course. Of course. Of course, all dialects, all varieties that people call varieties of Arabic they're very closely related, of course, but many of them are not mutually comprehensible. And if we're going to use that criterion, from that criterion, we should call it a language family rather than a single language. But Maltese is definitely part of that Arabic language family and not just a part of the larger Semitic language family. And I will get on to why that's the case. Before that, I have this little quiz that I prepared for my students at SOAS. So I thought it might be fun to do that now. Okay, so the quiz is very simple. Can you name the countries that have at least one local Arabic dialect? Now, what do I mean by a local Arabic dialect? It's easiest to explain by giving you some examples of countries that don't have a local Arabic dialect. France, which has tens of thousands of people who speak Arabic, and it does not have a local Arabic dialect because even if they were born there or their parents were born there, the variety of Arabic that they speak belongs to or originates from, when I say originates from, I'm not going back hundreds and hundreds of years, but if you go back a few decades, it originates from an Arabic-speaking country. Another example is of a country that, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a local Arabic dialect, would be Djibouti. So Standard Arabic is the official language of Djibouti, but most inhabitants, or the majority of inhabitants of Djibouti, speak a Cushitic language as their mother tongue. And on top of that, there are many native speakers of Yemeni Arabic in Djibouti. Do you see? Okay, so it's very simple. We've got 15 minutes, but let's not take 15 minutes. We can be much quicker. Just shout out countries, I'll type them in, and if they're right, then we'll get one of the 35. So go. Libya. Tunisia. Algeria. Morocco. Egypt. Palestine. This challenges my spelling. Lebanon. Syria. Oman. Iraq. Oh. Yemen. I heard Kuwait, Qatar. Oh yeah, how on earth did I spell that? Oh, UAE, good. More. Jordan. We've done half. Sudan, yep. Sorry? Chad. Let's see. Yes. Mali, yes. Malta, yes. The quiz says yes.
There is that country below Morocco on the southern border.
Yeah. Western Sahara. Mauritania. Huh? Cyprus. Did you know that Cyprus has a highly endangered local Arabic variety? It's only spoken by a few elderly monks these days. Maronites. Turkey, yes, definitely Turkey. Iran, most definitely Iran. Khuzestan in Iran.
Of course,
Uzbekistan,
the ex-Russian republics.
yes. Sorry? No. Malaysia, obviously Arabic is an important language in Malaysia, but there's no local Arabic dialect, yeah. Afghanistan, yes. We had Uzbekistan. Tajikistan, I don't think Kazakhstan. 6 more. No, not these days. For many years, but not anymore. I don't think Somalia, no, I think it's like Djibouti. Sorry? South Sudan, very good. Now in South Sudan it's very interesting. Sorry? Christian, yes, but it's an Arabic-based Creole. And another version of the same Arabic-based Creole is spoken in another country in the same region. Do you know which it is? It's Kenya. Egypt, I'm sure we had. Yeah. Yes, Israel, yes. Oman, we've had Oman. We don't have to fill them all in. Yeah, basically. Yeah, we had. So think in the Mauritania, Mali region. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Niger. Yep, and the other one that's similar in Nigeria. Yes. I've no idea what the last one is. Gozo. Let's see. Give up. Yes, let's give up. Uganda, yes. So Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan, they speak an Arabic-based Creole. Okay, there you go. So, what about linguistic relatedness? What do linguists mean when they say languages are related? For example, I should have prepared a slide on this, but I didn't. I don't know if you have any familiarity with Turkish or Persian, but I could show you hundreds of words in Turkish and Persian that look very similar to hundreds of Arabic words. This is not a very, I haven't kind of disguised this question very well, but are Turkish and Persian related to Arabic?
No.
Writing or
No, I'm not talking about the writing. Of course, Persian is written in the Arabic script, but I'm not talking about the writing, no.
It's genetic, no?
Yeah, exactly. Persian and Turkish are not related to Arabic, but that's why I didn't produce a slide on Turkish and Persian, because we can do it this way instead. We can ask, is Maltese related to Italian or Sicilian?
Part of it, yes.
Sorry?
Part of it, yes.
Yeah, so in the ordinary use of the term, of course, there's a relation, there's a link. But from the technical linguistic point of view, no, because when linguists use relatedness as a technical term, they mean that languages can be demonstrated to descend from a common ancestor. Okay, so Maltese does not descend from, Maltese and Italian do not descend from a common ancestor, but Maltese has borrowed extensively from Italian and Sicilian, just like Turkish and Persian have borrowed extensively from Arabic. So, how do we establish relatedness? How do we demonstrate that languages descend from a common ancestor? Sorry? Because of loan words? Well, actually, that's what we need to exclude, in fact, right? If Maltese has hundreds and hundreds and thousands of loan words from Italian and Sicilian, that obviously shows you that they've been in very close contact, but it doesn't show you that they're related. Sorry? Usually, I mean, that wouldn't be your first port of call, actually. A lot of people do it, but it's sort of not advisable. And it's led to, I don't know if you've heard of the Altaic language family. If you'll hear people talk about it, and then you ask what languages are in the Altaic language family, and different people will tell you different things. And some people will say Turkish, all the languages closely related to Turkish, Mongolian, Korean, Japanese, and then you ask them, how do you know those are related? And all they can do is point to some similarities in grammar. And that is not sufficient to demonstrate relatedness. Maybe if you find some very subtle similarities which are very unlikely to have come about independently in parallel by chance, then okay. But instead of grammar, there's a better way.
If you're extremely lucky, you have documentation. Otherwise,
yes,
you look for cognates.
In
key areas of the...
Exactly. What you do is you do what's called the comparative method, which is finding systematic sound correspondences across cognate vocabulary items. And I want to put this in double bold, systematic sound correspondences. It is not about similarity, okay? It's about systematic sound correspondences. So here are some correspondences in Semitic. Take a moment to look at this chart. What you will, this table I mean, what you will find is that when sounds in one column occur in more than one row, they will correspond to sounds in the other columns in the same way. So, for example, a lot of them are sort of trivial, like an N is an N in every column, okay? And that is true in this row, this row, this row, and this row, okay? So N corresponds to N across all of these languages. Now, let me repeat. It's not the fact that they're identical that's important. It's the fact that the correspondence is systematic. There's nothing more, there's no sense in which the fact that you get N in every column, there's no sense in which that is sort of a more important source of evidence than the correspondences we find with the sibilants, with certain sh. So certain sh are not, I mean, you get certain sh, it's not always one or the other, but the correspondences are systematic. And actually, I'll show you another version of this table in a minute that highlights that in a clear way. So let me move on here. and say, so how do we know that Maltese is a Semitic language? Well, the same way that we know about relatedness generally. It has numerous cognates with regular sound correspondences with other Semitic languages. So let's focus on the blue. Oh, the colors are a bit strange, but this blue S. Okay? So whenever you have an S in Maltese, you will always have a sh in Akkadian and a sh in Hebrew and a sh in Aramaic and a s in Ge'ez, which is the classical language of Ethiopia. Shemsh is an interesting one. Basically, Shemsh shouldn't be Shemsh. It should be Shems. So something sort of idiosyncratic has gone on with that word. And we have to be alert to matters like that. It doesn't invalidate the whole principle because we find this, and obviously this is just a handful of items. We can find this esh correspondence across dozens and dozens of items in Maltese and other Semitic languages. Okay, so I'm going to say one more time that it is not the fact that these words sound similar that is relevant, okay? Because if English or if Maltese borrows the word freezer from English, right? Freezer sounds very similar to freezer. It doesn't mean English and Maltese are related, right? Similarity counts for nothing. It's systematic sound correspondences. The Semitic languages actually look and sound quite similar to each other. If you go to deeper language families, i.e. where the common ancestor was spoken further in the past, like Indo-European, you find that the systematic sound correspondences are more, there's still systematicity, but the sounds are less similar. The classic example is Armenian. I don't speak Armenian, but if you look at, the numbers 1 to 10, when you have a free moment, look up the numbers 1 to 10 in Armenian and see how crazily different they are to the English numbers 1 to 10. But each one of them, maybe one is different, but the core ones are all cognate with the English numbers 1 to 10. It's just for the sake of illustration that, like a kind of t in English might correspond to, a p in Armenian and so on. Okay. A lot of, I don't know what the situation is these days, but historically, many Maltese people have been happy to say that Maltese is a Semitic language, but not happy to say that it's part of Arabic, okay? So how do we know that Maltese is part of what I think we should call the Arabic language family? The answer is that it shares many innovations with other varieties of Arabic that aren't shared by other Semitic languages. So this is how you do what's called subgrouping of a language family. You establish all the members of a language family by doing the comparative method, by finding cognates with systematic sound correspondences, but then you subgroup languages within a language family by looking for shared innovations. Languages which have shared innovations form a subgroup. So for example, what we find in all the Arabic varieties, including Maltese, are things like a preposition fi, meaning in. And this is not absolutely certain, but it seems, most likely correct. The fi ultimately derives from the word meaning mouth in Semitic. it's actually very common for prepositions, spatial prepositions, to derive from body parts. You know, English doesn't have any simple one-word prepositions that derive from body parts, but if you think of sort of the multi-word prepositional type things, like, you know, at the heart of, at the foot of, oh, back, thank you, of course, back, yes.
Form
Yes.
out, we say form.
Right,
Forming.
yes,
Form.
yes.
Either hat or form.
Yeah, and that's right, that's Semitic. And so fi, in, comes from that. In other Semitic varieties, in is with b, which of course you have in Maltese, but it only means with, right? A negative marker, ma, that is unique to the Arabic language family. Otherwise, it is basically la. What Semitists call measure 8. It doesn't really matter what measure 8 is. Basically, it's inserting a t sound after the first root consonant. So ftakar, htij, shtara. You only get this particular pattern in the Arabic language family. So that's how we know that Maltese is not only Semitic, but part of the Arabic language family. Okay. So, obviously, as we've already established, on both the linguistic and the sort of socio-political level, there are huge differences between Maltese and other Arabic varieties. One of the many differences is that most societies, virtually all societies, where Arabic varieties are spoken are what's known as diglossic. You have a state of diglossia, and what that means is there's a high variety of the language, which is basically classical Arabic, and that is used mainly for writing. And then there's a low variety, which you might want to call dialect, used for everyday spoken interaction. Okay? And Maltese is very interesting because it's, now, let me choose my words carefully here. We've established Maltese is a member of the Arabic language family. We can then ask, you know, can we be more specific? And yes, we can be more specific. One way we can be more specific is we can say it is not very closely related to classical Arabic. Instead, it is very closely related to the Arabic dialects, i.e. the low varieties used for everyday spoken interaction. And Malta is unique among the countries in which languages which are members of the Arabic language family are spoken, in that this, you know, an Arabic dialect, if you like, is the standard language, is the high language. And then there are also Maltese dialects which are in opposition to standard Maltese. Okay. So there's an important historical point here, which is that many Arabs and a minority of Arabists, not none, there's definitely some, believe that classical Arabic is the ancestor of all present-day dialects. And this is most likely not quite right. However, before you misunderstand me, and there are a lot of people who get this wrong and take this too far, what do I mean and what don't I mean when I say classical Arabic probably is not the ancestor of the present-day dialects? Well, what I literally say there is what I mean. What I don't mean is, I don't mean that if you go back 1,500 years, if you were able to, and you were able to observe how Arabs spoke in everyday spoken interaction, I'm not saying the way they spoke then would have been a million miles away from classical Arabic. No, it would likely have been really quite similar. And you know, Arabic is not at all unusual in this respect. If you're looking at the history of English, you look at Old English texts. Old English texts, the ones that survive, are written in a particular dialect of Old English. No one claims that all the English varieties now spoken today are descended from that dialect of Old English that happens to be preserved in texts. But you'd be mad not to use the Old English texts that we have to get a good idea of what Old English in general was like. Similarly, we can use classical Arabic as an excellent way of understanding what Arabic must have been like 1,500 years ago. Okay. So how do I know, though, or think I know, that classical Arabic is not the ancestor of the spoken varieties today? There's various bits of evidence. First of all, you know, I'm just going to give you one example here. And you might say, I mean, this might be obvious to you, or I don't know. There's an important historical fact here. An important historical consideration. And that is, can't we just look at writing from 1,500 years ago to see what Arabic was like then? Don't we have written records of all types of Arabic? The usual answer is no, not at all. The only type of Arabic that was ever written until very recently, with the rise of text messages and social media, was classical Arabic. That is sort of largely true, but it's not entirely true. Yes? I'm sorry?
You asked the question that if there is a source that written in Arabic language since about 1,500 years.
Yes.
Your answer is no. Right?
No. What I'm saying is, of course, we have abundant evidence of written Arabic from a long time ago. The question is, do we have evidence of, well, when we say written Arabic, this is an unfortunate term. I prefer to say classical Arabic, or we could say Quranic Arabic, or we could say the Arabic of pre-Islamic poetry, for example. This is all one variety of Arabic, which is well understood and well documented. The question is, do we have written evidence of other types of Arabic from that time, if indeed any other types of Arabic existed? Yes. Yes.
I think like that we might, the people might look to the definition in a different way.
Yes.
Because in reality in Arabic for word, as far as I understand, the formal Arabic language is the written language which has been written, you know, the Islamic, the Arabic, the mere religion is the Islamic.
Yep.
So the language of the Quran, which is the holy book of the Muslims, is Arabic.
Yep.
And it is well known that it is well written and precisely written since over 1,400 years ago.
Yep.
Apart from that, before that, there was a lot of people who in the same area who used the formal Arabic language. The dialects is another issue. In Arabic, where the dialects can be spontaneous. I mean, any tribe can have a certain dialects, like in Malta, for example.
Yes.
You go to a small villages where you find a special type of dialects. It doesn't mean that it is different Maltese language. It's not. It's just a dialect. But then there is, you know, the formal one, which is the Maltese language.
Yes.
To the bigger scale, it is the Arabic word. So that's why, you know, when we say a number of Arabic languages, it might not perceive it properly by the Arabic educated person.
Yes.
You understand what
Yes.
I mean? Because we know, for example, like Algerian or Moroccan,
Yes.
they have their own dialect, but formally they speak Arabic very well.
Yes.
However, their dialects must be difficult for the Libyan to understand or
Yes.
for the Egyptian to understand.
Yes. Yes, yes, thank you very much. I mean, all of those points I agree with entirely. I mentioned at the beginning that, you know, or to put in a slightly different way what I mentioned at the beginning, it's my experience that many Arabs will say, for example, it's not hard to communicate with Arabs from a far distant Arabic-speaking country. And this is, of course, correct. Why is it not hard? It's not hard because you have many linguistic resources that you can draw on other than your native dialect, the most obvious being standard formal classical Arabic. But also sometimes in different countries it might be French, it might be English, it might be that a particular dialect is very well known, be it Egyptian or Syrian and so on. Now, returning to the question of the sort of pre-Islamic era, obviously the Arabic of the Quran did not somehow emerge in a flash. It already existed before the Quran was written down. And the question that scholars have been occupying themselves with for many years is the Arabic that we find in the Quran, in what sort of social situations was it used before Islam? Of course, it's uncontroversial that it was used in high formal social situations for composing poetry and so on. The question is, was it also the way that mothers chatted to their children, right? Many people have argued yes, many people have argued no. You might hope that one way you could settle this question is by looking for texts from that period that are Arabic but that are not classical Quranic Arabic. It is usually asserted that no such texts unfortunately exist. As I'll show you in 1 second, there actually are some. But let's imagine that there are none whatsoever. Still, we can draw on other types of evidence that strongly point to the conclusion that there was a type of Arabic quite distinct from Quranic Arabic that was used for everyday interaction. Here is just one example, one piece of evidence. What you can do is you can look at the dialects now and you can look for linguistic features of the dialects that are shared between more than one dialect, which are absent from Quranic Arabic. And here's an example. In a subset of Arabic dialects spoken very far from each other, we find what you might call an intrusive in. I don't know if you should call it a morpheme. It doesn't really have a function. It's just the sound in or n in active participles. Active participles, they still sort of exist in the measure 1 in Maltese, but they're quite restricted. It's things like nizel, dihel, etc. So here are some examples for you. In Uzbekistan Arabic, we have hit you zorb, that's the hitting. Na, okay, this is, the grammar has gone quite strange. Na wouldn't be there in many dialects. That's expressing the we. And then kum is you, and then you have this in, this sort of linking in. Omani Arabic, she has hit you. Vorb, that's the hitting. It, that's the she. Ish, that's the you, and then you've got this intrusive n. Nigerian Arabic, darbinhe. He has hit her again. Okay? So these are like at the extremes of the area in which Arabic is spoken. And so it's completely implausible to think that in one of these, let's say Omani, they suddenly started doing this, and then it spread not to Saudi Arabic, not to Egyptian, not to Syrian. It skipped them out, but it went direct to Nigerian and Uzbekistani Arabic. That's utterly implausible. What the presence of this feature in these very far-flung dialects suggests is that it's an extremely ancient feature of at least some types of spoken Arabic. And it is completely absent from Quranic Arabic. But, like I said, there actually is also some documentary evidence. There's very little documentary evidence written in the Arabic script, but you can write Arabic in any script you like. And a particularly useful one for linguists is Greek, because Greek, you have to write in the vowels, whereas in most of the Semitic scripts, including Arabic, you basically don't write in the vowels. And it's been conclusively shown that that there were varieties of Arabic spoken several centuries before Islam which didn't have case marking. Okay? And you can't tell this from documents written in Semitic scripts because the case markers aren't written, because they're short vowels at the ends of words. But in Greek, you can see it, and they're not there, or they're there, but the case system is not functional. It doesn't work as it works in Quranic Arabic. So I think there shouldn't really these days be any doubt that while of course contact with other languages clearly changed dialectal Arabic significantly, right? When the Arabs reached the Maghreb, reached Western North Africa, and many Berber speakers started to learn Arabic, of course that process changed spoken Arabic. But dialectal Arabic, non-classical Arabic, already existed before the Islamic era. Okay. So, what about the Arabic dialects? How can we classify them? So the classic major division is between Eastern and Western. And Western means Libya westwards, or maybe Western Syria westwards. Western Egypt westwards. I don't know where Syria came from. Okay. And the way people draw the dividing line is by the first person imperfect verbal inflection. So how do you say I do, I write, okay? Eastern dialects are in this regard, I'm not going to say overall they're more conservative, but with this particular feature, they're more conservative. They express first singular with an a prefix and first plural with a n prefix only. So I write, we write is ektib, niktib, okay? Western dialects are innovative, and they have first singular n and first plural n and u. So like Maltese, nikteb, niktbu. Okay? So by this criterion, as well as a number of others, Maltese is a Western Arabic dialect. This is a particularly interesting one. The teens in Maltese, they have this curious il suffix, which clearly derives, exactly how it happened is not quite so clear, but it clearly derives from the end of the ten, the ar. And it's really one thing I think is one tiny little detail of Maltese that really appeals to me is how this il, which is obviously not the definite article, it comes from this ar. It's been extended analogically to kemil. Presumably that was facilitated by the fact that kem takes a singular, oddly, even though, you know, conceptually it's plural. How many things? Just as the teens, you have multiple things that you're talking about, but they require the singular. So it's not unique to Maltese. You can also find either this exact form or forms similar to it sporadically found in different Western Arabic varieties. Okay, now another really important way to classify Arabic dialects is not geographically, but sociolinguistically, and it's based on lifestyle, or if not the lifestyle of today's speakers, then the lifestyle of their recent ancestors. Nomadic pastoralists, Bedouin, versus urban or agriculturalist. Okay, so here are some key differences. So Bedouin, classical Arabic has this qa sound, qa. In Bedouin dialects, this is voiced. I don't know if you know this terminology, the difference between voiced and unvoiced consonants. You know, let's say s is voiceless and z is the same sound voiced. So q is voiceless. In Bedouin varieties, this becomes voiced, either the direct voiced equivalent of qa, which is ga, or a close sound g. In sedentary dialects, generally, mostly, there's an unvoiced reflex. It might be qa, it might be a glottal stop like it is in Maltese, or in a few dialects in Palestine, it's a k. Okay, so this is like al in Maltese. The next one is interdentals. These are th sounds. Bedouin dialects keep these. Most sedentary dialects, not all, but most, lose them. So, for example, this is the case in Maltese. You have tnain, it comes from ithnain. Okay. Another feature we can look at is how do you express possession? In classical Arabic and in the Bedouin dialects, it's usually with what linguists call the construct, which is basically you just stick the two nouns in a possessive relationship next to each other. So Maltese has this, of course. I got this from Albert and Marie's grammar, I didn't want to invent one, so I took this one, kelmet il-general. But more often, so sedentary dialects have this. Maltese is absolutely typical in that this construct, possessive construction, is basically restricted to what's called inalienable possession. When you don't, you know, the general doesn't own the word, right? It's just his. That's not going to work as an explanation for my example. But anyway, all right, just forget that part. The point is, in sedentary dialects, you very often have possession with a sort of prepositional type item to express the possession, like English of. So Maltese, that's ta. Okay? Yes?
Will you allow one example?
Yes, please, yes.
If you're in a barbecue eating chicken sticks,
Yes.
you can't say koshtik and type.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I sometimes give the reverse example, like, you know, in Arabic, if you say, you know, ir-ras bita'i, it sounds all wrong. It sounds like you've got one in a box. You know? Okay, all right. So, this Bedouin sedentary distinction is very important in the North African context. So, what Arabists do here is they distinguish between what they call Hilalian and pre-Hilalian dialects. That comes from this tribe called Banu Hilal, which there was a large confederation, in fact, of Bedouin tribes that migrated to North Africa in the 11th century, i.e., 300 to 400 years after the initial settlement of North Africa by Arabic speakers. So you can still find pre-Hilalian dialects in the old cities of North Africa, for example, Fez, Tétouan, Tlemcen, various coastal towns in Algeria, Qayrawan in Tunisia, and other coastal towns, Tripoli in Libya. And all of those places were founded or settled by Arabic speakers in the 7th to 9th centuries. So Maltese, the Maltese dialects, is clearly a pre-Hilalian variety. So that's not really surprising, given that it was settled in the 11th century from Sicily. So the Maltese language came to Malta sometime before the Banu Hilal turned up, so you would expect it to be pre-Hilalian. If you want some features of Maltese that are specifically pre-Hilalian, it's the voiceless reflex of qa. That's not very sort of special, as it were, to pre-Hilalian varieties specifically. These next two are a second singular pronoun inti with no gender distinction. So in other than the pre-Hilalian varieties, there's a gender distinction in the second person, and inti is feminine, and masculine would be inta. Then there's, we talked, I mentioned before, within Semitic, only Arabic, the Arabic language family, only that has the T which comes after the first root consonant. But only the pre-Hilalian varieties have this special N plus T prefix, like intlibes, intmesah, and this is the same thing, but something strange happens when the first consonant is an S, the T goes there, okay? So, what we can, to summarize what we've said so far, Maltese is Semitic. Not only that, it is definitely part of the Arabic language family. Not only that, it is what we could call an Arabic dialect, as in it's not, it's related to what we call the Arabic dialects and not to Standard Arabic. Not only that, it is a Western Arabic dialect, and not only that, it is a pre-Hilalian Western Arabic dialect. Okay. All right, so why is Maltese interesting to Arabists? I'm sure I'm sort of singing to the choir here, but Maltese is obviously a fascinating and wonderful language. It is most famous, let's say, among linguists because it's, there's been this very intensive long-term contact situation between an Arabic variety and the unrelated and typologically very different Indo-European varieties, Sicilian, Italian, and more recently English. But, oh yes, and so I can't help mentioning what is one of my absolute favorite features of Maltese, which is the way that English verbs are borrowed. I'm not going to go into the fine details of it now, but this doubling of the initial consonant and putting the addition of the glide, the ya, and then they become part of what an Arabist would call the final weak verb class. So, id-downloadiyat. And you know, why is that done when these words, for example, in English end in a consonant? The answer is very complicated, but it has to do with the fact that so many verbs were borrowed from Sicilian and Italian, which happened, almost all of them, to end in a theme vowel. So you've got this extraordinary mixture of languages with this totally unique result. So that's wonderful. But obviously, Maltese has much more to offer than just that. One other thing, among many, that it has to offer is that it's very useful for understanding the historical development of Arabic dialects. Even though Maltese itself, similarly to Arabic, has very scarce early written records. They're not non-existent, but they're rather scarce. So why would this be the case? It's because Maltese has been basically isolated from contact with other Arabic dialects since the mid-13th century. So what that means is that if Maltese has a feature which is innovative with respect to classical Arabic, and it shares that feature with other Arabic varieties, then you know that those innovations must be rather ancient. But you have to be cautious. So I'll give you some examples, because the point is, Maltese, we do have written records of Maltese, especially, you know, one source of evidence. I mean, it's not what you'd choose. What you'd love is sort of enormous long plays written in, you know, where they're trying to capture the speech of ordinary people. That would be nice. But often all you have to make do with is names, people's names, and how they're written down. And you can still get a lot of information from that. So, for example, take the sound that is written with a Q in Maltese is pronounced as an Now, many, as a glottal stop, now many very well-known Arabic varieties pronounce this sound, which historically is a q, a uvular stop, as a glottal stop. For example, the Arabic of Cairo, the Arabic of Damascus, of Jerusalem. And you know, it's always difficult when you're doing historical linguistics, when you're trying to figure out the past from the evidence of the present. In principle, there's an infinity of ways that the language could have been in the past. Okay, and how do you decide between them? One rule of thumb is, don't posit a whole load of independent parallel developments. Okay, this is just a basic principle of science. It's Occam's razor, right? Keep your theory as efficient and minimal as possible. So you might want to say, okay, well, if Maltese pronounces q as a glottal stop, and so does Cairo Arabic, so does Damascus Arabic, several dialects of the Maghreb. Oh, surely this is an ancient feature. It must be, you know, pre-11th century. But no, I mean, this is an obvious example, because, you know, why on earth does Maltese write it with a Q? Is because you don't have to go too far back in Maltese history to find that, no, in Maltese it was pronounced as a q, and it became a glottal stop really quite recently. You have exactly the same thing, perhaps less obviously and less well known, with the interdentals. So, as I showed you on that chart, almost all, where are we? Here. Almost all sedentary dialects have stops for the interdentals. and Maltese is the same. So it's a natural assumption to think, well, this is just an ancient feature of sedentary Arabic, but no. If you go back into the written records, you see that Maltese had interdental stops until quite recently, until maybe the 17th century or something.
Registers the interdental.
Right, right.
It makes a clear distinction.
Right, yes, thank you very much. So we have to be cautious. Okay. But as long as we're cautious, we can use Maltese as a source of evidence for how Arabic must have been around the time that Malta was settled by Arabic speakers. And I used this in my work on the history of negation, the evolution of negation. So, what's the story here? How am I doing for time here? Oh, I've been slow. Yeah, but we want time for questions. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, what's the story here? The story here is that Maltese shares with many, but not all Arabic dialects, a bipartite or discontinuous negative construction. So, mas smajtx l-istorja, I didn't hear the story. You all know that. Now, many Arabic varieties don't have that. They have, they express negation just with a single preverbal marker. So this is a Syrian example. Allon ma habetha. He told them, I didn't fall in love with her. So negation is just with preverbal ma. Okay? Now, then you have this discontinuous or bipartite construction where you have the same preverbal marker joined by a new postverbal element, which is derived from, well, classical Arabic. Yeah, that's probably a loose use of that term. Old Arabic, shay meaning thing, okay? So Egyptian is probably the most famous example, but it's by no means limited to Egyptian. So ma bħebbix miġiju hin ktir, I don't like his coming here a lot. So negation is with this bipartite construction, as in Maltese. In Maltese, you have the same construction. This is where you find the two types of construction. So a lot of people, you know, Arabs who live over here, who are familiar with Egyptian, might tend to think that it's only Egyptian that has this bipartite construction. Not at all. It's basically across the whole of North Africa and Malta, and in a corner of Yemen as well. Okay? All the rest just has the preverbal, the more conservative preverbal construction. Now, what is really interesting is that there's a similar split among the Berber languages. So the Berber languages, I don't know if you all know this, Berber languages are spoken in Morocco, Algeria, Libya, especially, you know, by the vast majority of speakers are in Morocco and then Algeria. But it's spoken as far east, in fact, as the oasis of Siwa in Egypt, Western Egypt. So what do we find if we look at negation in Berber varieties? So some have only the preverbal, have only a preverbal construction, where the negator is or a similar item, wer in some. So this is Tuareg, which is, so Tuareg is spoken in the south of, the southwest of the Maghreb. And the Arabic variety, by the way, to sort of give the game away about what's going on here, the Arabic variety spoken in that region, in Mauritania and so on, is called Hassaniya, and it only has it only has this preverbal construction for negation. Okay, so some are like that, but others have a discontinuous bipartite construction whose postverbal element is also derived from a word meaning thing. So this is from the Moroccan varieties Central Atlas Tamazight, or ifir sha. Okay. So, not sure what happened there. It's pretty clear. I'm not going to go into all the arguments, but it's clear that you've got language contact here. But the question is, in which direction? Okay. A scholar of Berber suggested some time ago that the direction is Berber to Arabic. This is plausible. I mean, you know, if that's what you believe, you know, you can, the presence of bipartite negation in Egypt is okay. In Palestine, it's okay. In Yemen, it starts to get rather awkward. But perhaps he wasn't aware of that. That's what he thought. Now, Maltese is extremely instructive here. Okay, this is where the Arabic-speaking settlers who brought Arabic to Malta seem to have come from, Tunisia via Sicily. The point is, almost all of them came in the 11th century, and the last Muslims were expelled in the 13th century. So, as we've already said, Maltese, of course, it's been incredibly innovative in all sorts of ways, both because of language contact with Sicilian and Italian, but also just some internal changes. But it also preserves a lot of things. So if Maltese has bipartite negation, that suggests that it is a pre-11th century feature of Arabic. Now, there's, like Arabic and Maltese, there are not many written records, early written records of Berber, but there are a few. So, for example, there's a chronicle from, when is it from? The 12th century, from the region of Jebel Nafusa, which is here in Libya. And it's got a few negative constructions, and they all seem to be of just the preverbal kind. So the point is, Maltese gives us a snapshot in some respects of what North African Arabic was like in approximately the 12th century. And it can show us in this case that negation must have been innovated in Arabic and borrowed by Berber and not the other way around. So that's just one example of how Maltese can help us understand the history of Arabic generally. Yes. So, yes, sorry, right. So the point here is, this is just a couple more examples. I'll just go very quickly through these. Do you remember I said a little while ago that, one key difference between classical Arabic and the Arabic dialects is case marking. Classical Arabic has it, dialects don't. And I showed you that already before Islam, there were varieties of Arabic that had already lost case. But, were there varieties in which it survived? Some evidence from Maltese points sort of intriguingly in that sort of direction. Now, there's a difference between case and marking indefiniteness. Case in classical Arabic is marked with a vowel, and then indefiniteness is marked with an N after the vowel. There's a few words in Maltese that, so shame, right? This comes from shay, and I don't think we can understand the N as anything other than a reflex of this indefinite marking N, which, you know, Arabic dialects are not supposed to have. Certainly, now, sorry, there are Bedouin dialects that have something that is called the same thing, but it has a very different function. But this seems to be a relic of the same thing and the same function. And then what about ebda? Ebda definitely derives from this word abed, but how do we understand the final vowel? So, you know, I'm sure there's more to be said about this, but there's certainly intriguing pointers there. Then, for example, you can look at the vocabulary. So some of Maltese vocabulary is extremely conservative, right? So this use of ra to see, you get this in classical Arabic. In basically all other spoken Arabic varieties, it's shaf, okay? But Maltese shows us that shaf, as your only word for to see, is more. It must be a sort of a recent trend, somewhat recent. Similarly, how to express ever. In Maltese, it's with ut, which again you find in classical Arabic, and basically hardly in dialects, certainly hardly with the meaning never or ever. It's otherwise with umr, meaning age, right? Or life, sorry, life. In my life, as a way of expressing ever. But also the other way around. So Maltese has jeep, to bring, which is basically ubiquitous in Arabic dialects and not found in classical Arabic. It derives from ja'a bi, to come with. It's a sort of a verb and a preposition have fused into one. So the fact that it's in Maltese shows you that that is not a recent trend, okay? All right, and so let me just finish with a quick word about the opposite, the way in which Arabic can help us understand things in Maltese. So, in any language, you're going to find irregularities and exceptions to rules. And they're very puzzling if you look at the language in a purely synchronic fashion, just as it is right now in the present. If you take a diachronic perspective, a historical perspective, you can usually explain these things. And I would say that's the principal way that Arabic can help us make sense of Maltese. So, as most of you know and are probably sick of hearing about, most of the work I've done on Maltese has been about numerals. And so we've kind of covered all this. When do Maltese numerals 2 to 10 take a T suffix? This is gross simplification compared to what I told you on yesterday morning. But we could say that the core context is the following. When the following plural noun starts with 2 consonants and has only 1 syllable, as in fnik, bnit, klip, tfal, etc. Okay, but then there's this word sneen, years. The numeral never takes the T suffix with sneen, years. But sneen is 1 syllable and starts with 2 consonants. So what's going on? This is an irregularity. Then conversely, we can say when do numerals never take T? I mean, there's various answers, but one thing we can say is when the following plural noun starts with only 1 consonant in pronunciation. Shur is an example of that. Okay, in writing it starts with 2, but in pronunciation it starts with only 1. Films would be another example. The numeral never takes T when it precedes these. Okay, but what about yim? Yim starts with only 1 consonant, and the numeral always takes T with this. So what's going on here? Well, if we look into the history of these words from an Arabic perspective, we can understand. So some Arabic dialects have this phenomenon, or a version of it. And what we find is that in the dialects that have it, this only happens with broken plurals. Now, do you all know what I mean by broken plural? No. A broken plural is like all of these guys in Maltese. Fennec, rabbit, the plural is fneek. You mess around with the inside of the word to make it plural. You don't add a suffix on the end. That's a broken plural. When you add a suffix, that's a sound plural. So in the Arabic dialects that have this T insertion with numerals, this only happens with broken plurals that start with a vowel. So here's an example. Qalam, pen, plural aqlam. Aqlam starts with a vowel, therefore, taman tiqlam, 8 pens. Now, shahr is an interesting one because shahr has 2 different plurals. One is a broken plural that starts with a vowel, ashhur. Because it's a broken plural that starts with a vowel, taman tushhur. You get a sort of vowel harmony there. Okay, but there's another plural of months, which is shuhur. And if, seeing as that does not start with a vowel, you don't insert T there. Okay, and Maltese shur comes from shuhur and not from ashhur. Okay. So, Maltese broken plurals that start with 2 consonants, they have 2 different Arabic sources. One is exactly these plurals that start with a vowel. So like hbib comes from ahbab, starting with a vowel. But the other source is plurals that start with 1 consonant. Basically, Maltese has cut off an initial vowel, but it's also squeezed out a vowel that comes after the first consonant. So klib comes from kilab. The point is now hbib and klib have the same pattern in Maltese. For that reason, they behave the same with respect to T insertion. But originally, it would have only been hbib that had the T insertion. And then it sort of spread to klib. So the question is, why didn't it also spread to sneen? There's 2 reasons. First of all, despite what you might think, it's not a broken plural. It actually has the "een" plural suffix that you see, for example, in Maltese. It's very strange because the singular it's feminine and it ends in the marbuta, a. But for some reason, sana in Maltese, sana in Arabic, has as a possible plural in classical Arabic, it's sinun, sinin. Sinun is nominative, sinin accusative and genitive. So that's one good reason. That's why it never had it in the first place. Why didn't it pick it up like klib did? The answer is that years, you're very likely to want to count years, right? So numeral plus sneen combinations are very frequent. And what work in historical linguistics has shown is that very frequent words and phrases are resistant to analogical regularization. Okay? So that's sneen. What about yim? How come yim doesn't resist T insertion like it should? Like words that start with only 1 consonant, words that start with only 1 consonant. So it's basically the same story in reverse. Unlike sneen, it derives from the right kind of T inserting broken plural, one that starts with a vowel, ayyam. Okay? Like sneen, it's very frequent in combination with numerals, and so it's resisted analogical regularization. And the other thing is, it's undergone this irregular phonological reduction. So if you look at, in a sense, I mean, you can have initial geminate consonants in Maltese, of course, like downloadia. So in a sense, yim in Maltese should be yim with a geminate consonant, but it's been simplified to 1, but it still behaves as if it started with 2. Okay, so I'll just very briefly conclude by saying, of course, what most linguists think about Maltese is, of course, true. The ways that it has shifted away from Arabic through contact with Sicilian, Italian, and English is absolutely fascinating. But naturally, Maltese has far more to offer than this. One thing I think is really interesting are the cases where Maltese has stayed the same and Arabic has left it behind, as it were. Touching on the issues I was talking about at the beginning, different groups of people with different agendas are liable to exaggerate in different directions, either by wanting to say that Maltese and Arabic are worlds apart, but you also get others who like to make out that there's virtually, Maltese is just a dialect of Arabic like any other, which is clearly not the case. What I think there's no doubt about, though, is that we can most fully appreciate the intricacies of both Maltese and Arabic by studying them together. Okay, thank you very much.
Questions?
Yes, thank you.
Just a point of interest, okay?
Yes.
At one point, At one point, you said that the preposition fi, meaning in, okay,
yes,
is sometimes in some variety of Arabics given as bi, meaning, okay, and that we don't have that in Maltese. That's almost totally correct, but not totally.
Thank you. Okay.
You see, because we have bil-layl, bil-layl, and bi-nar, binar.
Yes.
That would be in, but not only that, you see. And this is something which is getting out of fashion, but was very, very, very strong in my childhood, in my tradition, okay? We used to say, ma biex juh, ma biex ach. Yeah, big juh, big ach.
Right,
okay?
right,
So
right.
That's it. So it's still an irregularity sort of. I mean, but we
Great,
have it, okay?
great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Because there the B is amel bih. It's part of the expression amel bih.
Right, right.
Let me say it in English or in Italian. Amel bih. Effettuar. Amel bih. Effettuar. There's another word. In English.
Sort of says offer, come back.
Right.
Amel bih. Amel bih.
Yeah.
Amel bih lunch. Not overcome.
Thanks a lot for a very good presentation.
Thank you, thank you.
I just want to comment about when you try to classify, let us say, between West and East
Yes.
Arabic dialogue, and where is the Maltese will fit in West and East.
Yes.
But I think, I don't know, I will tell you my opinion.
Yes.
The comparison here, it is not really, from my opinion point of view, precisely can be taken. Why? Because the circumstances in which this dialogue was spoken in North Africa and in Malta was completely different.
Right.
How, the Malta was a colony, and by being a colony, it was exposed to certain, learning and educational system during the colonial, which is stretched over a few hundred years. And that obviously will affect the way that the people will speak any vocabulary of their dialogue, whether it is Arabic or not Arabic. And I think that is one of the unique things in Maltese language.
That's
and
right.
everybody can agree with that, you know, because we know Maltese will have Arabic vocabulary, Italian, English, French, so there is really a good mixture in a different percentages. So that's why I just want to comment on this part, you know. I think when we compare it, exactly it might not be precisely give us the precise conclusion.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean, but it's not hard to find Arabic dialects that have similar influence, perhaps not quite so deep-seated, but, you know, many speakers of Moroccan Arabic, for example, you know, the percentage of French-derived words that you will hear in their speech is as high as the percentage of Italian or Sicilian-derived words that you hear in Maltese.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not, this sort of mixing is not unique to
Yeah,
Maltese.
but I didn't mean that way
Right.
exactly, to be honest. I meant, for example, in Malta in certain times, you need to speak in English, whether you like or not.
Okay. Well, but
for
again,
example, the university was Italian language.
yes.
I mean, there was a structure, a systemic structure, which was completely not existing in
Yeah.
other countries which you are
Well,
speaking of.
yeah, but I mean, this has changed in the last couple of decades, but until rather recently, in the Maghreb, it was exactly the same with French. You know,
Yeah.
French had, of course, there were differences, slight differences, but French had a similar position to Italian in those countries that Italian had in Malta. So yeah. Oh, but of course there are different. I think for me one of the most crucial differences from a sort of socio-linguistic point of view is that you never had this diglossic situation in Malta,
Yes.
or at least maybe I suppose you must have done for the first century or so, but thereafter not. Which is very interesting, and I think that is in fact the cause for a lot of the difference between Maltese and Arabic dialects. Is that Maltese, as it were, has missed out on about 800 years of daily influence from classical Arabic.
And the last comment, and I will stop on that, you know, you commented at the beginning that the Maltese will find a difficulty sometimes in understanding Arabic.
Yes.
My personal experience is not like that.
Okay.
Yeah, because when you see Maltese in Arabic country, for example, working with the families, they will easily understand Arabic. But obviously, you know, when you are here in Malta, it depends on the circumstances. But I think it is bilaterally the same. It depends just the context where you are living and how many people you are communicating with.
Yes.
And thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much for your contribution. Yes. No, I completely agree with you. Of course, one interesting thing about, I mean, what makes Maltese difficult for Arabs to understand? There's several factors. One is elements of pronunciation, of course, and that is a significant issue. But probably the biggest issue is the huge amount of non-Arabic vocabulary in Maltese. But the Arabic and the non-Arabic vocabulary in Maltese is not sort of randomly distributed in different conceptual domains. And so, you know, if you're talking about family and food, there's going to be a lot less Romance vocabulary than if you're talking about government and poetry. So yeah, depending on what situation an Arab and a Maltese person are trying to communicate in, there's likely to be big differences in how successful that communication is.
I'd like to take this up,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
Please.
I used to think that the reason was more, I mean, this lack of symmetry in mutual intelligibility.
Yes.
I used to think there was a socio-linguistic reason at the bottom of it, because as is well known, some Maltese are pretty racist towards, you know, Arabs, and we also find this among Maltese themselves. Some speakers of standard Maltese will tell you, oh, I couldn't understand somebody from the countryside, you know, because they speak in broad dialect or something like that.
Yeah.
So I used to think that this was the case. But when I started to learn more about some of the stuff you've been talking about, more specifically the realization that Maltese was cut off from mainstream Arabic so long ago, so that, as it were, Arabic continued developing, whereas Maltese became, well, the Arabic in Maltese became fossilized.
Yeah.
And if I may, let me give just one example.
Yes.
So for rain, we still say shita,
Yeah.
and there's classical Arabic, shita, or whatever.
Yeah.
But in most Arabic dialects, you find matar.
Oh,
Wouldn't
well.
you?
No, I think it's not the best. Your point is exactly correct, but I think it's not the best example because matar is the usual word in standard Arabic, and you find it in dialects, but you do find shitta in dialects. Yeah.
So what I was trying to drive at would be that Arab speakers would understand the classical Arabic, as it were, in Maltese.
Yeah.
But the Maltese would not understand the innovative Arabic vocabulary.
That's a very good point.
So there would be a linguistic basis for the lack of symmetry.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. I think on your first suggestion, I think there's also something to that. I would come at it at a slightly different angle. I think, you know, different linguistic communities in different parts of the world are sort of more or less prepared to do the work needed to understand a speaker of a different dialect. Do you see what I mean? And Arabs are just, you know, it's part of being an Arabic speaker is like communicating with Arabs from other parts of the Arabic-speaking world. You know, it's part of being a sort of like successful, and let's also say an educated Arabic speaker is developing different strategies for communicating effectively with speakers of other Arabic dialects. So, you know, it's like, as a learner of Arabic, it's frustrating to me to, for example, go to Egypt, spend some time there, study Egyptian Arabic, get reasonably good at it, and then go to, for example, Tunisia. And it's like, of course it helps, but it doesn't help that much. Whereas for a native speaker of Arabic, there's two things. First of all, a native speaker of Arabic has obviously a far more profound knowledge of Arabic than a second language learner. But I think they're also used to this, you know, if an English person turned up in a Caribbean country where they spoke an English-based Creole and they couldn't understand it, they'd be like, what is this? You know, I'm generalizing. They're not accepting of the idea that one should do a bit of work to assimilate and understand, you know, what are the differences and how can we overcome them? Whereas like Arabs, it's just part of being an Arabic speaker. You learn to do this.
But surely, Chris, most Arab speakers of Arabic would have at least a passive knowledge of classical or modern standard Arabic.
Yes.
And so, even if one can't understand, as it were, or communicate directly from one dialect, say Yemeni to Tunisian, the fact that they share a common base, you know, they could do it in a sense through the relationship which they perceive to classical Arabic.
That is very true. Although I would like to say that in my experience, the extent to which classical Arabic is used as a way of improving communication between speakers of different Arabic dialects is often exaggerated. So it is the trouble is we always have these conversations among highly educated people, and highly educated Arabic speakers use classical Arabic. But if, for example, you watch, you know, you can find a very common thing is, say, an Egyptian TV presenter will interview an Algerian singer. I don't see them using classical Arabic.
They wouldn't,
no. I'll tell you what happens. The Egyptian speaks pure Egyptian, and the Algerian does what they can to sort of speak a sort of delocalized Maghrebi Arabic with a little bit of whatever random Egyptian they've picked up.
But my point was that while speaking their own dialect, shall we say, or, you know, they would still sort of understand the
Yes,
other
yes.
through their knowledge
Yes, you're
of,
quite right. You're quite right.
of their
Yes.
passive knowledge of
Yes,
classical
yes, you're quite right. Of course. Yeah.
Please, you speak.
I can add that we can use modern rather than classical Arabic. Classical Arabic will be more in Quran and something like, but there is another, I mean something between classical and dialect of Arabic. There is
Yes.
modern language.
Modern standard, yes, yes.
So modern standard language will be used in formal cases rather than classical Arabic. And so it depends, of course, on the speaker, whether he is educated or not. So for example, if I'm speaking with Morocco and I didn't manage to communicate with him, I mean, with his dialect, I will switch to modern standard rather than classical Arabic.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, there is an important difference between classical Arabic and modern standard Arabic, but I didn't want to go into that in the talk because the distinctions becomes so many that it gets complicated. But yes, yeah. Thank you very much, yeah. Yes, thank you.
Hi, as a non-Maltese and
Yes.
as a learner of Arabic,
Yes.
and also as a linguist,
Yes.
what is the perception of Maltese as a language or dialect, whatever it is, in the eyes of the native Arabic speaker? I mean, how do they perceive the Maltese language?
I don't know, we have some native speakers here, we should ask them, but I think it's...
I can tell you one word, Sar.
Sar. I see.
I think it's hard to generalize. I mean, I think, you know, again, I think we often get a rather limited picture of what the Arabic-speaking world is like, because in a university setting, like I say, you mix with highly educated people. And many Arabs are very highly educated, but there are also many who have very little education. And yeah, they're all Arabs, they're all Arabic speakers, and they might have different attitudes and different approaches. I think, so what I'm getting at is, I think a lot of Arabs have no opinion about Maltese.
Can I read this question? I was once giving a lecture on Maltese in Syria, and a venerable sheikh came over to me. At first he was disgusted by the material I was giving to him. But then he clapped me on my shoulder and said, through you, Arabic has become an official language of the European Union.
Yeah, yeah.
But my question was also related to the level of comprehensibility by the native Arabic speakers, because yeah, of course, fundamentally it is a Semitic language, but in terms of vocabulary, you really need a lot of access to English and to Italian in order to understand Maltese.
Yeah, that's right. So
how can really Arabic speakers, monolingual Arabic speakers, can understand Maltese?
Yes.
This is my question.
They do now understand it.
Well,
Among Arabic people in Arabic countries,
yeah.
they would understand it.
Yes, yeah. So this has actually been investigated empirically by a number of colleagues of mine. I mean, not from my university, but friends who I don't know. I don't have time to. If I had a bit more time, I could show you the paper now. I'll have to sort of half remember, half guess. I can tell you the broad conclusions, but I'm just, for the sake of illustration, going to sort of say some numbers, but don't quote me on the numbers, but just to illustrate. The study was involved Tunisian speakers, Libyan speakers, and Maltese. The intercomprehensibility of Tunisian and Libyan was perhaps not as high as you might think. It came out as like 85%. And okay, so that's your baseline, right? And of course, it's a somewhat artificial set. But you mentioned monolingual speakers, right? So this was an artificial setup where you didn't have two people standing in front of each other able to negotiate a way of communicating effectively. You just had some people sitting in front of a computer being exposed to spoken Tunisian, written Tunisian, etc., and Libyan and Maltese. And so the Libyan and Tunisian, it came out as like 85%. And then Libyan and Tunisian understanding Maltese came out at something like, again, don't quote me on the figures, but just to illustrate, something like 50%. And then Maltese understanding, those came out at about 35%, something like that. So it's, yeah. But like I say, it's crucial to bear in mind that, I mean, it's perhaps an excessively sort of abstract and scholarly preoccupation that I have about saying, you know, what about the actual dialect as it's actually spoken? You know, Tunisian as it's actually spoken and Moroccan as it's actually spoken. Are they, how similar are they? How much mutual comprehensibility is there? The answer is less than you'd think. But, you know, like I say, it's very sort of abstract because in real life, when people get together, they can negotiate. They can spontaneously find ways to understand each other absolutely perfectly. Yeah.
Of course, I used Semitic Maltese.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then there were a few things which I could not say in Arabic, and I would make signs with
Yes,
my hands.
that's right.
I just take them
That's how it works. That's how it works. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there something to be said about the presence of Berber words in Maltese? You know, there's quite some of them.
Yes.
Zabouch, Fakroun, Gramshur. Of course, they were already present in Sicilian Arabic.
Yes.
But this sort of shows a lot of sort of a long time of fornication, right, between Berber and Sicilian Arabic.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't, you know, I'm not a huge expert on this issue, but basically, when you talk, for example, about, you know, Arabic-speaking settlers in Malta or Arabic-speaking settlers in Spain, a huge proportion of them would have been Berbers, right? Yeah. Right. You know, so obviously the soldiers that conquered Cairo or you know, Egypt in the 7th century were Arabs. But by the time they got all the way to Morocco and then started invading Spain, you know, most of the settlers and the soldiers were Berbers. Yeah. So
contingents of them in Sicily, in Muslim Sicily, it's very clearly stated that they established themselves, and they're not at all associated with a lowly society. I mean, they established themselves. Some of them became rich landowners. So it really depends on which group made it to Malta at which time.
Yes, that's right.
And it's, I mean, I think that's a very, very important factor to consider.
Yeah. You know, the initial wave of conquests, the Arab conquests of North Africa, you know, there was the armies, and there were a few settlers, but the numbers were tiny compared to the indigenous population. And then, okay, there were more Arabs that came with this Banu Hilal in the 11th century, but still the numbers are tiny. And there's this kind of amusing thing. If you go to Morocco now, basically, again, don't quote me on the figures, but just to illustrate the point, something like 50% of Moroccans will self-identify as Arabs, and 50% will self-identify as Berbers. And if you look at their DNA, they're all Berber, and they're not Arab, right? The Arab DNA in that part of the world is a tiny proportion of the total. So it's not to do with facts of genealogy, it's to to do with cultural output.
I apologise if I'm off topic, but at the start you said that language is spoken and written. But that made me think about sign language and whether that had anything to offer about relationships. And then it also made me start to think about gestures, because, for example, some Maltese gestures don't mean anything to English people. So I just wondered if that had some bearing on the relationship.
I'm sort of guilty, like many linguists, of sort of forgetting about sign language, and that's no excuse, because it is. Isn't there there's a sort of Maltese sign language, isn't there?
That's different from English, I believe.
Yeah. Yes.
What does it descend from? Like, presumably it's not a spontaneous.
Maltese Sign Language is about 25 years old.
Yeah.
And developed spontaneously among the community.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, dictionaries and
Because most sign languages in the world descend from either British Sign Language or American Sign Language. But of course there are numerous independent ones. And Maltese is independent, is it?
So does Arabic have sign language?
So there's I don't know what is taught in deaf schools generally in the Arabic-speaking world, but I do know there's this one absolutely fascinating case of when I teach historical linguistics, I address this question of we talked about relatedness, right? And so you can ask the question. Okay, the point is you can ask, right, we know English is Indo-European and Maltese is Semitic, and we cannot demonstrate that English and Maltese are deeply related, but you could still ask the question whether they are or not, right? Maybe they are. We don't have the tools to answer the question, but you can ask the question. And more generally, you can ask the question, if only we had the tools, would we to investigate this, would we find out that all languages in the world descend from a single common ancestor? That's an interesting question to ask. Monogenesis or polygenesis. And if you forget about sign languages, which you shouldn't, but people often do, then you can seriously talk about monogenesis. But if you remember about sign languages, there are multiple examples you can point to where signed languages have been spontaneously developed. And there's a famous case in southern Israel, the Bedouin of the Negev desert. There's one particular small group who have the majority of them have congenital deafness, and they spontaneously developed their own sign language. There was another very famous case in Nicaragua of children in a deaf school who were not taught any sign language. They spontaneously developed their own. And so I think, we ought to extrapolate from the fact that in the last 100 years, there are several documented cases of language being spontaneously developed. We ought to extrapolate from that surely not all spoken languages in the world today descend from a single common ancestor.
And Basque.
Basque,
Many
yes.
find difficulty with Basque. They say that it is not descended from a
Yes.
Semitic language.
This is right. Using the comparative method that I showed you very briefly with finding systematic sound correspondences between cognates, you cannot demonstrate that Basque is related to any other language. But I think you need to put it that way. You can't demonstrate it, but we also haven't demonstrated that it's not related. Yeah.
And English has systematic sound relations
Yes.
with Arabic.
No, it doesn't.
I chased it.
Okay, well, you should publish this.
I am going to.
Okay, good. I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, but I have to wait a lot of years.
Okay.
It is. Even Chinese, for example. The first word that we do Chinese believing that it came from Arabic was the word gobi.
Gobi.
Gobi. Job.
Yeah.
Or the desert.
Yeah.
The desert and Mijub.
I see.
That is the I is like ED.
I see. Yeah. But this is what I was trying to explain, that similarities...
Not similarities, systematic.
All right. Okay, well, I look forward to the publication.
And systematic, not only, relations between the consonants, how they change from one language to another,
Okay.
from one word to another.
Okay.
Because even when we said the ilma, what did you say instead of shita, what did they use?
Motor.
Mata, ta, da, ni. Yes.
But these are games we can easily play.
It's not a game.
It is a game, though. It is a
No,
game.
Because like that I discover what people are saying without knowing the language.
I see,
For
okay.
example, they'll be talking in some language. French is, I studied French, I studied Italian, I studied Arabic, I studied Maltese, I studied English.
So-
but they are very often words from other languages, and I can
Okay.
make out what they are.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I can make out what they are better than many others, not
see.
by the dictionary.
I see.
Okay,
I
so
see.
I'm afraid we have to stop it here.
Okay.
It's so interesting.
Yes.
This was a fascinating talk, Chris.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for- when are you coming back?
Soon, I hope. I hope soon.
Really, yeah.
I hope soon.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you,
This was-
Michael. Thank
it
you
was
so much for the
interesting.
invitation. Thank
And
you.
thanks for-
Thank you.